Smithville. I want to welcome you to our second Excellence Through Ethics graduation brunch. Y'all, those of you that are in line, go ahead and keep getting you some food. We've got plenty. And if you need some more, guys, have at it. So thank you again for coming. I want to very quickly introduce just by name and thank our panelists, Mr. Lewis Webb, Ms. Shelley Spires, and Mr. William Rambo. And thank you, or thank them for coming and sharing with us today and talking to us about ethics in their professional lives. And finally, I want to turn it over now to Adrienne Hobbs, who is an accounting major here at GSW. She's on the Enactus presentation team, and she's going to act as our moderator today. So again, welcome. Thank you, guests, and thank you, graduating students. And on behalf of the School of Business, congratulations.
Hey, my name is Adrienne Hobbs, and I'd like to thank our moderators or our panelists for being here. And we're going to start off with a short presentation about themselves, a little bio, their name, what they do, and a little bit about themselves. Would you like to start?
Sure. Good morning, my name is Lewis Webb. I live here in Americus, Georgia. I have a small business here in town. I did go to school here at Georgia Southwestern for 2 years. Dr. Liz Wilson, as you all know, she was one of my advisors who gave me some great advice while I was here at school. But went to the University of Georgia.
I didn't advise them to go to Georgia.
Details. But yeah, I ended up getting my undergrad and a graduate degree in economics from the University of Georgia, and I've been in the investment world for about 12 years now. So it's great to be here. I'll kind of pass it down to everybody else, introduce themselves, and then we'll go from there, I guess.
I'm Shelley Spires. I am the CEO for Albany Area Primary Healthcare in Albany, Georgia. Just because it has Albany attached to it doesn't mean that's the only place we have sites. We have 28 locations, and we're part of this campus actually as it relates to the family planning services that are provided here. So we're very glad to be a part of this school in that respect. I got my undergrad here from Georgia Southwestern, and as I was sharing earlier, I was a transplant from Georgia Southern, not on my own will, but I enjoyed every bit of Southern, and I come and enjoyed Southwestern even more. And finished here with my undergrad in human resources. Again, had Dr. Wilson as my advisor. We had no idea, as we have talked about numerous times over the past years, where my path was going to take me. And healthcare was where it ended, or landed, hopefully not ended. Then I went on to get my master's in healthcare administration from Troy State University. At the time, it was an opportunity where they brought the institution to us. So it was a convenient situation where I could obtain my master's in Albany. And from there, I went and worked my way up with the company. I've been there 16 years, and I was human resources manager, human resource director. But you know, when you're the only HR person, you can be whatever you want to be. So at some point, I called myself VP of HR. And then I worked on up into the deputy director position, assistant HR, or assistant CEO, and then to CEO. And I'll turn it over to William.
Good morning. Thank y'all for having me. I'm William Rambo. I'm a lawyer with Gatewood, Skipper, and Rambo. I've been here since 2001. My law partners are Jimmy Skipper and Jim Gatewood. My practice is very variety-wise, and that I do everything with the exception of tax and bankruptcy. Our firm is kind of a typical small-town firm in that you kind of close a loan, do a will, get a kid out of trouble. It could be a variety of different things that we do. I also, in 2013, was appointed by Governor Deal to serve as our state court judge. So I was served a year under his appointment, and then I was elected the following year. So I've been serving as our state court judge for about 4 years. Sumter County State Court is a court that handles criminal dispositions as well as civil. The criminal is limited to those offenses which are misdemeanors, those that are punishable by 12 months or less in jail. What you would typically think of is DUI cases and those types of things that are in that court. I also handle civil cases. Those civil cases are everything with the exception of family law, which would be like divorce work or child custody work, and real property. But with the exception of those two, this court has concurrent jurisdiction with the other court that we have that handles civil and criminal cases, which is our Superior Court. I serve as the only state court judge in our county. There's the state court position is a countywide position. Ours is unique here in Sumter County in that I'm able to maintain a private practice and also serve as a judge. So for the purposes of the discussion today, ethics really plays a strong role in my position because I'm always having to balance between my representation of individuals in civil cases or criminal cases and my private practice with my responsibilities that I maintain as the judge. So it's always a balancing test, and I'll get into the specifics of it. I'm married to Lisa Rambo. She's the juvenile court judge. So we have 2 children, Madeline and Morgan. Morgan's about to head off to Georgia, which is where I graduated. I may have overstepped that. I'm proud of that. University of Georgia graduate, and went on to law school at Mercer. I graduated from Georgia in '97, Mercer in 2001, and that really wraps up who I am. Thank you.
All right, so now we're going to start off with some questions for our panelists. So anyone can answer in any order. If you need to say something again, maybe you remember something, feel free to take the microphone back and talk about it. So the first question I'm going to ask is, how are ethics relevant to your industry? And what changes have you seen?
I'm glad to start.
Okay.
I would say that ethics is extremely crucial in our industry right now, and it is one of those things that we have constantly see change as far as our industry views ethics and how they're treated. Most of you probably remember the financial crisis of 2007. There was a lot of banking industries that just got hammered. A lot of blame got passed around as to whose fault that was. I'm here to tell you it was a lot of people's fault. But since then, our government and our society in their infinite wisdom have decided to, really regulate the industry in order to try and prevent crises like this from happening again. When they do that, really the only thing that they can do is come up with rules, laws, disclosures, continuing ed, all these things that, try and ensure that we will act in an ethical manner when it comes to dealing with clients or people. And it's an interesting conversation. I'm kind of glad we're having it. I can't sit here and tell you I have the answer to it all, but they've certainly tried to play a more involved role in ethics in our industry. A lot of, I think, those laws, rules, regulations, whatever that we have to do, they're almost, I would say, kind of punitive and compensatory in nature, in that they don't necessarily prevent the people that would perpetrate the injustices to begin with, but it has played a tremendous role in our industry and will probably continue to do so going forward. So, yeah, it plays a big role.
So in healthcare, we do primary care, so we're outpatient services. Majority, we do some inpatient. With us, ethics plays a role in many different facets of the organization. So one would be on the billing and reimbursement side. Medicare, Medicaid. If you have seen the news in certain situations, there's been a lot of CEOs who go to jail because of Medicare and Medicaid fraud. And it's not necessarily because we as a CEO committed the fraud, it's our team committed the fraud, and it's up to us to make sure that those things do not happen. So a lot of times with healthcare organizations, you'll have a compliance committee. And that compliance committee will actually design and develop questionnaires for exiting employees as well as current employees to see what areas that might be some concern that we need to investigate or we need to look into. Also with that compliance comes some sort of anonymous reporting, and it allows employees to actually, or patients, to report something that they feel was either unethical or illegal. When I was in HR and doing orientation, I always encouraged the employees to make sure that if they felt that something was not right, to go ahead and report it. Because all we would do is investigate, and if it wasn't anything, cool, it wasn't anything. But if it was something, at least we had heads up and we could go ahead and start investigating what that issue really was. With that, we've had situations, so for example, maybe I have a cashier who we call cashiers, but actually they're checking the patient out as they are leaving the doctor's office. Everybody has to pay a copay, right? So when you're leaving the doctor's office and you're going to pay your copay, we've had situations where patients would tell the cashier, my insurance isn't effective until tomorrow. So if you can just hold this claim and redate it for tomorrow, then I will be able to just pay this $20 versus the whole amount. There's something unethical about that and illegal. So those are some situations. We had another patient, this is quite humorous to me, but he was very persistent that he needed oxygen. And we were like, we did his pulse ox, we did all the stuff that medically we're supposed to do, and we said, you do not need oxygen. And he said, well, you don't understand. If you don't say I need oxygen and it's medically necessary, Medicare will not give me an oxygen tank. Now, I don't know why this man wanted oxygen. So he asked the nurse, could I please go outside and run around the building just a couple of times and come back in and let you check it? I'm sure I will qualify then. So you get all sorts of things. And I'll give one more story and I'll pass it on, because we can sit up here and tell you the logistics and the legal terms, no offense, of how things are all day, but hearing the stories and what's actually happened are the things that'll stick with you. But we actually had a patient also that had a skin tag, and they were getting married, and the wedding dress had a V in the back, and us girls want to look good from the back because that's where the pictures are coming from. And so going into the doctor's office said, I'm sure this is cancerous. Really, they did not know, but if it was cancerous or even considered the fact that it might be, then insurance paid for it. If it just got removed because it's a skin tag, it's cosmetic. So the patient said, I'm sure this is cancerous, so can you remove it? And the physician said, well, why do you think it's cancerous? And I said, it's a mole, it's cancerous. And they said, no, it's not cancerous. I said, well, you have to put that, because they said, you have to put that because if you do, then the insurance will pay for it. And they said, no, it's a skin tag, and that's how we're going to code it. So there's a lot of ethics. There's patients kind of know that side of it too, and they'll play you. And the same thing with employees. I work with a lot of physicians, a lot of medical experts, and there is something in our organization that we consider unethical to treat family members. Private practices probably do it all the time, but from an organization that's deemed by the federal government, we have some things to uphold. So, I've had providers that I've had to bring in and say, you can't treat your daughter. No, you shouldn't have treated your husband. So those are some things that we have to look into. So ethics plays a big role in the healthcare industry. So if you're interested in that, there's a lot of areas that you can actually focus on that pertain to the ethical and illegal side of healthcare.
As it relates to my private practice, we have our state bar has a whole ethics division that allows complaints to be filed with them, with lawyers, which is very common. It used to be the lawyer profession was well respected, and that's been tarnished through the years by unethical conduct from lawyers, both in pursuing cases that you see on the news that don't carry much weight. Even though you may not have a law degree, you can tell certain cases just by what you hear about them, and you may not hear everything, but it's not a case that should be taking headlines or a case that should be pursued, and so lawyers have damaged their reputation in an effort to try to get some quick money. So with that, the Ethics Commission part of our state bar has been very, very active. With your practice, your ethic, considerations are, is this someone that I've already done legal work for in some capacity, and now I'm on the other side of it? You think about it, I do a lot of real estate closings. Those things happen so fast, and it's a big event for the person that's buying the house. It's a big event for the person who's selling the house. But for a lawyer who's done a lot of them, it's pretty perfunctory work. The lawyer really does the last end of that. Real estate paralegals handle it. So it's not a real intimate relationship between the parties at a closing table. But it can create a situation where, like, for example, a divorce. Well, I would know something about the person's financial structure based on the real estate closing. I know what equity may or may not be in the house. I know a lot of things. And then those issues very well could become relevant in the divorce case. So we run a conflicts check trying to make sure that we are above board on getting ourselves into a situation where we look unethical. And I'll tell you, it's way more difficult in a rural town than it is in Atlanta, because they know you. That we don't have that many lawyers, and I do a will for them, and I'll see them 3 years later, and they tell somebody, they're like, "That's my lawyer." And I did a will, and it was a 45-minute deal, and and I am their lawyer. But but they think of that as a lawyer for life, and there are some things that do break up that relationship where you're not totally bound to it. But in Atlanta, the chances of you running across a lawyer that did a real estate closing for you, unless it was a family friend, probably not very good. So in my private practice, it's very difficult. I also have to be careful of the clients that my partners have, to make sure that, including business entities, and we have to run a fairly extensive conflict check. The flip side of it, on the judiciary side, people come in there. I've represented them before in a divorce case 10 years ago. They're in there on a DUI charge. I don't remember them. They remember me. One, my last name is so easy to remember. So that's a little bit of a disadvantage for me. And red hair, the other part of it. So redhead and Rambo, that's my lawyer. Well, I'm not considering any previous relationship with them when I'm ruling on the merits of whatever it might be in the courtroom as a judge. But they may believe that. Or if they were on the other side of a divorce case, maybe I represented the wife or the husband and they're the other spouse, and they think that they got an unfair deal, or I was more punitive to them because of that. So it's very difficult to maintain that balance. The great news is for judges that are doing it part-time like me, and this is our code of judicial conduct. There's 7 canons, but then there's every rule in the world with it. The good news is, if you don't know, you don't know. And that's true in this part-time judge. If I don't remember them, and then there is some gray area, so that I don't have to take a calendar. Like, for example, tomorrow I have 155 cases set for court in the morning. I'd have to run a conflict on every one of those people. And I some of them I do know, and there's a method that you take to what they call recuse, which is to step away from the case. And in certain instances, maybe the parties just waive it. You would hope that, and I make it my priority, that my previous dealings with someone, good or bad, are not going to affect my judicial temperance. But the Code of Judicial Conduct is very, very expansive for judges. There's been a lot of judges who have taken advantage of their power and done things that were wrong. I get calls all the time. My son got a parking ticket. My son got a speeding ticket. And they can call me. It's harder to call a full-time judge, but they can call me because I have a law practice. And so they call me on my office phone, and then they say, "Hey, William," and I say, "Hey, what's going on?" They're like, my son John. I was like, yeah. He's like, well, he got a ticket. I'm like, whoa, 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 whoa. But they can get to you so quickly, and you couldn't get to a full-time judge in that same manner. But when you balance it against that private practice, and you're accepting new clients, and you're accepting phone calls, and you want to be responsive, and you know these people, you accept the call, and then you have to tell them that that's not something you can get involved in. And if you don't want to be in front of the Judicial Ethics Commission and lose your position, you can't make exceptions. You can't say, well, he is a good kid, or let the legal system play it out. My job is not to lawyer in there, it's to handle it from the judicial side. And that means that I can't do favors for people. As a lawyer, it's your job to be an advocate, and that's great. And I can do that all day long, but I can't do it in Sumter County. But as far as addressing the matters of ethics, that's the way it fits into both my private practice and my judicial responsibilities.
Okay, I'll start off with the second question. How do you assess ethical attributes and characteristics when you're hiring?
Anybody want? You're HR, why don't you start out?
You'll have to forgive, I like to talk, so this could be bad. But when we're interviewing individuals from an HR perspective, so I've been on both ends. I've done support staff, managerial, and then we recruit physicians and what are now known as advanced practitioners. And so, one of the things that has been so unfortunate in the past years is the internet, because people can go on the internet and memorize their answers and be able to answer the question, and you think, man, this is a great candidate. We're going to hire them. So what I actually do is I turn it around into a situation. And so if I ask them, how do you build your, or how do you rate your teamwork? And I'll say, give me a 1 to 5, 5 being the best. Oh, 5. I say, oh, great, a 5, that's fantastic. Okay, now give me an example of where you were part of a team, what role you played, and what the outcome was. Yeah, that's the same look I get from the candidate. Because what has happened is there's been a lot of prep, and people want to respond quickly, and you've got to have something to back that up. And I use that the same thing. So if I say, tell me a situation you've been in where you feel like someone's been unethical, and how did you handle that situation? And so I leave it more of an open-ended situation so that I can kind of get a feel for what those individuals have been in. Now, what happens a lot of times is you get someone like me who likes to talk, and so by the question and the 10-minute answer you got, you still didn't get the answer. And so you have to, go back to the question and say, the question is, give me a situation where this has happened. And so they'll give you that situation. Well, how did you handle it? Well, I'm not sure, my boss handled it. Well, okay. So those are the kind of things that I try to do. I leave my questions open-ended so that I can truly get a feel for what that candidate does know, a little bit about their character and what they would do in situations. Especially in HR, I really hate the HR candidates that come in because they get drilled like no other. And mainly because I've been there. And so when I ask them, tell me about, how did you handle this? And it's interesting to hear some of their responses. But from that, you get the idea of the strengths of that candidate and the weaknesses. One of the things that I always try to do is, and especially with my physicians, is I try to get a feel for what their values are, what their morals are. We're a community health center, so what that means is we provide services to the underserved, uninsured, and underinsured population. And as you know, with the change in administration from the presidential side, that is a little weak right now. We're in limbo. We don't really know what's going to happen. But all that being said, it takes a very unique person to be able to serve in our areas, because these are not areas where resources are readily available. These are not areas where you have the most compliant patients. And so you have to have a bit of a heart, if you will, to be able to provide great care to these individuals who otherwise would not receive health care. And so it takes that special person. And so one of the things I tell the providers, if they've never been to our organization, is I'll say, I'm a terrible recruiter, actually, probably, but I give you everything. I give you the good, the bad, and the ugly. And I'll tell you, I tell them, these individuals are in big need. And do you have what it takes to serve these individuals? And so what's happened in the past is the government has this loan forgiveness, if you will, called the National Health Service Corps that provides these providers an opportunity to go serve in areas that I serve and get their loans repaid. And that sounds appealing to someone with $300,000 of debt. But if it's not in your heart and it's not in your character to take care of these individuals, then it's not going to matter how much you get paid back on those loans. And so what's happened in the past is we went from a direct face-to-face interview, which I was a part of, selecting these individuals to receive this scholarship or this loan repayment, to doing a phone interview. Anybody, again, can tell you anything. You don't even know if that's who you're really talking to. You could be talking to Jane Doe and you thought you were talking to Susie. But all being said, you get these responses that are glowing responses. And so these individuals get this opportunity and then they come to serve and fulfill their obligation. And they're the most unhappiest people on earth because they were really meant to serve in a private practice in a prominent area where there is lots of things to do, and little old Edison, Georgia is not where you're going to get that fulfillment. So those are some things you have to really look at when you're interviewing as it relates to their characteristics and really about their ethics too, because it says a lot about them as a person and if they'll fit in your organization based on their beliefs.
Go ahead, William. Unless you're ready for the next question.
Well, I'm really not in charge of hiring with our firm, but I will say this, I have a voice in it, and what we really look for is an ethical violation or someone who doesn't have the appearance of an impropriety and doesn't conduct themselves in the way that we want the firm's image to be, can tear up your firm. I mean, we have a small firm. I mean, there's 3 lawyers there. So your face for our firm is very out in the forefront. I mean, if you were at King & Spalding in Atlanta with 1,000 lawyers, one disgruntled person who went and complained about one of the thousands of lawyers in there probably wouldn't have that much impact. But when you have a small firm, then you're in a small town, it's very important that you maintain that type of image that you want. Some law firms want a very cantankerous image, very hostile, and that's not what our firm has tried to do. I think it's whatever the flavor of the lawyers are in there. We obviously have very aggressive lawyers, but there's a time to be aggressive, but it's not all the time. I mean, a courtroom is a place where you handle disputes when you've tried every other opportunity to resolve it short of that, because handling in the courtroom takes it out of your control and places it in that either the hands of a judge or a jury. So when we try to look at lawyers and recruit lawyers, and we maintain the small firm, but have that idea that understand the ethical responsibilities. Anybody can push a case into a courtroom, and the one who benefits the most from that is the lawyer, because you're paying the lawyer for the time they spend on the case. The better lawyer resolves it in the quickest way, having input from you about a result that you can live with. And you know, you hear about great lawyers pulling the rabbits out of the hat, and a lot of that's TV. I mean, there are certain instances where you really do have something like that occurs, but it's really not in rural South Georgia. It's not in Sumter County. I mean, but as far as how we look at it in hiring, I think we just try to look at someone whose references speak well, and the way they dress and the way they present themselves and their passion for what we're trying to achieve and helping others. If it comes through at an interview, then we give that person a good consideration.
I will just say that to me, you know, ethics is your behavior and your actions based on that moral compass. And I've been looking for another advisor in our firm for about 2 years. And I've had the partnership of working with one individual for a little over 12 years. I've been in private practice for 8 of those 12. And one of the things that I could always count on him was I had no question about his ethical stance or his moral stance when it came to dealing with our clients. And I'm here to tell you, you might not believe this, but you'll see it throughout your life at some point. But there are many people out there that value their finances above their family or right on cue with them. And you cannot do anything to discredit their trust when it comes to dealing with that. So when it comes to adding somebody to our organization, much like William and his lawyers that can't tarnish the business name, we have to have people that we can trust. And the only way we can trust their actions, because there are many different courses of action that they can take throughout a day, throughout a week, throughout a month, throughout a career, is to know that when it boils down to it, that they will make the ethical decision or what we believe is the morally right decision.
Okay, and one of the questions I really want to ask is, what advice would you offer us graduating seniors as we start our careers?
Don't memorize the internet questions. You have a lot to offer, and you get a lot of great experiences here at Georgia Southwestern, and they didn't pay me to say that. This is actually a great school from the standpoint that it's small enough that you have opportunities that you would not have at larger schools, and that's what makes it so special and for me and my life and my career path that's taken place. I think that what you have to do is understand how important those experiences are. And I remember Dr. Wilson working at Easter Seals, and we got a lot of examples. And sitting there in that class, I really wasn't sure what those examples meant. But getting out in the real world, those things really hit home. And so one of the things that I tell my team, I have an executive team which consists of a chief operating officer, a human resource director, a CFO, a DON, and an administrative assistant. And with that team, what I always tell them is, you have to be able to take what you've done, you have to learn from what's happened, and consider the outcomes. And you can't run to me every time you need a decision made, because I can't always be the one making that decision. You have to be willing to consider the risk. But consider the risk. If you pass, remember what you did and continue to do it, because it helped you get to where you are in the next step. If you failed, learn from it and don't do it again. And that's what I tell my staff. I had my HR person who decided we're about 350 employees, and 70 of those are providers. And one of the things that she decided to do was, and I trained her, given that. So one of the things she decided to do is she wanted to change our payroll system. And at that time, we're about 200 employees. And I just sit back and I thought, okay. And I waited and I waited. I waited for the business plan, the proposal, how we were going to implement, when we were going to start the implementation process, how that was going to look, how we were going to phase it in, how we were going to educate the employees on the new system. I didn't get it, and I didn't get it. And the next thing I know, we're in a board meeting, and she says, we're going to start this next week. I was like, okay, we're going to start this next week. Well, guess what happened? It totally failed. Totally failed. I could have stopped it. I could have prevented it, but she wouldn't have learned. And so one of the things that we sit down and talked about is, what did you do wrong? What would you do over? How would you do different? And once we talked about that, and she realized you can't move a mountain by yourself. And Rome wasn't built in a day. So you got to ask for help. You got to have a team. You got to have people who can help you think through every piece of that process. Because I promise you, as good as you think you are, somebody else's piece of brain or mind will help you for that piece that you're missing. And so when we sit down, and wasn't mad, I wasn't angry, I just said, let's learn from it. What are we going to do next time? And so next time we established an implementation team, we established an agenda, we established set meetings, and we determined how we were going to roll this thing out. It worked. And so there's, you know, we learned from it. She's not ever done that again. We actually have implementation meetings on things that sometimes I think we don't really need one, but we have one anyway. But that was a huge project, and those are important things. We open sites all over. With primary care and being part of a federal government, we have an opportunity to set up shops in underserved areas. And we have to be creative with those resources because we don't get a lot of money from the government, even though they have high expectations of us. And so we have to be creative with how we do that. And one of the things we do is you got to think through the process. And again, I can't say this enough. Don't think you're so smart that you have all the answers. You could be salutatorian and valedictorian of your class in high school. You could graduate with honors from here. I promise you, you don't have all the pieces it takes to make it happen. It has to be a team effort. So just keep that in mind. Learn from your mistakes. You're going to make them. Just accept them, learn from them, and don't do them again.
And I think one of the things that you have to remember as you're graduating is you're preparing yourself for your career. You don't always know exactly what you're going to do. I mean, you may have studied, you may have a focus area, but life's funny. I mean, you get in one thing and it opened the door to another, and you realize that I'm maybe better at that. You know, you don't want to limit and pigeonhole what your opportunities are, because I think that's where the ethical part starts to trickle in. You're dissatisfied with it. Maybe the income's not what you expected. Maybe you realize that you don't like the people you're working with anyway, so what matters is my reputation. Those things start to come into play. You just see it on TV with people who have ruined what we all perceive to be a great career, and you find out that they've been so unethical in what they've done, and that's usually generated from a dissatisfied soul. So I would say to be flexible about what you think you want to be. Just know how you want to be with whatever it is you do, which is to be the best person you can be. Be smart about what you do, accept failure, learn from your mistakes. You're not going to know everything as was said, but the person that adapts to those circumstances, grows from their mistakes, and is willing to listen about how to do something better is going to be a happier person. And I think the ethical considerations about how you handle your business will fall into line, because a happy and satisfied person usually is living a pretty good life.
Okay, and if you can answer, has there ever been an ethical dilemma that you faced that you can share with us?
Oh, yeah. Personally, I had a situation, divorce is usually a lot of where this comes up, but I had a lady that I represented, and she had been to another law firm and talked to them in a confidential situation about her marriage and gave every nitty-gritty detail. Her husband later goes and hires the lawyer that she had met with, and she came to me, and I was shocked. And so I called, because it is a self-policing bar that we have for lawyers, and reported it. And they investigated. It turned out that the lawyer made what ended up being my client sign a document that said that everything that they discussed would not be protected under any type of confidentiality. And the state bar said, we don't agree with that, but we're not going to take any major action. They took some action, but major action, because there was a disclosure. But, you know, when you think about ethics, how ethical is that really? Yeah, it's a great way to cover your rear end on something, but the fact of the matter is, this lawyer knew that this person had divulged this information to him and expected them to keep it confidential. and expected to have an advocate, and then fairly intended to hire this lawyer, just didn't have the money at the time to do it. And so while the lawyer escaped, you know, a public reprimand from the state bar, I never respected that lawyer again. And from the standpoint of the courtroom, because it went to trial, the judges never did either. And he, you know what he did? He moved to Brunswick because he couldn't make a living here. Because I told everybody I could tell, because I was so aggravated with it. But not only did I, but think about what my client did. She went out and said, this lawyer, I told him this and that, and it all came out in the courtroom because, you know, you know how it will do. So he ruined, for a nominal fee, he ruined his credibility, ruined his reputation, and had to relocate. And quite frankly, judges check up on other lawyers all the time. They go to these state functions and they're all friends. So I mean, really, there's 159 counties in Georgia. I'm just not sure where that lawyer could be successful. I don't know what his practice is like where he is, but I can tell you that he won't ever have a lawyer that he can call up, at least in around this area, for any help, or a judge. And while he didn't directly fall in conflict with this ethics rules, he manipulated them enough to where he could get by, but at the end of the day, he still ruined his reputation.
So we have this thing called HIPAA. Does everybody know what HIPAA is? Health Insurance Portability Accountability Act. And that's a privacy act, if you know what it is. And so my situation was we have medical records, and those medical records pertain your health information. And with that, I had an employee whose spouse decided to go visit one of our clinics as a patient, and as that spouse got ready to leave, we give a patient visit summary, and that summary is basically just what happened with your visit that day. And this patient got somebody else's summary. And so we did what we were supposed to do from a legal standpoint, notifying the individuals that this was going on, and we politely called the spouse of the employee, who's also a patient, to return the summary. And he refused, because this was an opportunity for him to seek legal action against our organization as it relates to violation of HIPAA. So during this time frame of him seeking out legal advice and counsel to determine his case, his wife, who worked for us, decided she would look in his medical record to make sure he had everything he needed to take to the attorney, and would print it out for him. And so with that being said, she had no rights to go into that record. It was not a need-to-know basis. It was a personal benefit. And so with that situation comes some consequences. And with that particular situation, we took and suspended the employee. We did have to seek legal advice on our end to make sure we handled it appropriately. We sent a letter to the spouse requesting the information that was not his, because it did not belong to him. And when we investigated, we did find out that the employee was going into the spouse's chart. So with that came suspension, and later it resulted in, I think as Dr. Wilson talked to us years ago about relieving someone of their duties. And so that person is no longer with us. But you know, there's situations where they're not fun, they're hard. I had another situation where, does everybody know what a flexible spending account is? It's this card that you can allocate your money to pre-tax for medical expenses. You'll learn about it when you get your career going. But with that, there's IRS regulations that you can only use those funds for certain things. And I had an employee who was a switchboard operator who decided she would go to Catherine's and shop and have it delivered to the office, and use her flexible spending account money for her new wardrobe, which was not a qualifying expense, by the way. And so, you know, a situation where you know someone who is going to have a hard time finding a job somewhere else, a situation where you know that person may have needed those clothes, who knows, you know, I don't know the situation. But unfortunately, she had to be terminated because she, of course, violated policy and a benefit that actually is regulated by the IRS. So there are always situations you're going to be faced with as it relates to tough decisions, and how you're going to handle those truly depends on your policy. I know, as you've all been taught, it's right there. Be consistent, follow it, because the situation will arise again. So the HIPAA violation, had one last week. Employee spouse not happy with something. She went in, looked at the chart. We have a way of auditing those charts. We went in, audited, yes, she went in there, and she suffered the consequences. So just got to be consistent. It's going to happen. It's going to continue to happen. And just make sure you follow your policies.
I'll give you, excuse me, a quick example. I won't talk specifics, but in our business, you know, you generally go out, you solicit clients, you hope to get more to a certain point, but there are situations that arise where you don't necessarily agree with the client on things. And in those particular situations, of which I've had 3 in over 12 years, there were situations where I actually fired the client because although I didn't feel like there was any possibility that I would not act in the best interest of the client, I still felt that there's a possibility that they may not see it that day or that way one day, or it could be construed that way one day. And I'm here to tell you that I was under no obligation to do so, but it really hurt when it was one of my biggest clients at the time. The other 2 were not, but faced with the situation, I can tell you I certainly felt better after the fact having done that, rather than sit there and just wonder whether or not you could go on like that.
And I think we're done for questions for me, so we're going to turn it over to the audience. I think they might have some questions for you.
I'll start us off. I've got a question for all 3 of you. Shelley, it's going to apply more to you because you work for a bigger organization, I guess. So you know there's going to be a layoff, and you're going to announce it on Monday. An employee comes in on Friday all excited because he's getting ready to close on his new house. Do you tell that employee, or do you wait and announce it so that everybody knows it at the same time? You say, don't buy a house.
There you go.
I say consult with Lewis. You know, I was faced in that situation. I worked prior to this organization, and I'm just a baby, by the way, but I worked for a hospital that ended up closing due to financial stability. And I was that person that went and bought a car, my first brand new car, and was very excited about it, only for 6 months later to realize that the organization was going to close. Nobody told me that, but I do know how it feels. And so a lot of times, based on that situation, what I would just basically say to them is, you know, please understand the situation and the stability of the organization and make sure you make a good choice in what you decide to do. Now, is that a very gray answer? Absolutely. But that gives me an opportunity to not go out and everybody drop their jobs on Monday morning because Joe has already told them that the organization is closing. And that's a very difficult situation to be in, but I do try to figure out ways to explain to individuals before they do things if I know it's a risk for them without directly giving them an answer. This has nothing to do with the closing, but I had an employee who was wanting to grow her personal career. And this is what I'll tell you too with the graduation question, is good things come to those who wait. And if you don't remember anything else, remember that. You know, I made $10 an hour coming out of college with my undergrad. I had no expectations. All I had ever made was minimum wage, which was $3.50 and then $7. You can't leave out on graduation day, enter that door for that new job tomorrow, thinking you're gonna make six figures. Now, if you do, kudos to you. But it's gonna be very few of you who do that. But what you have to realize is that, and what I realized was that $10 hour a job got me where I am today. But it took, I graduated in '98. So you can't just think things happen for you overnight. But all that being said, I had a friend, a co-worker, and we got our masters together, and she decided she was going to go work for another community health center. And we kind of like the attorneys and the advisors, we have a state organization, so we kind of know what's going on with other areas. And she called me, she said, I think I'm going to apply for this job, what do you think? I'm in HR, and I said, I think if I thought it was a good idea, I would have applied. And that's all I said to her. Because I can't keep someone from reaching or trying to reach their dream by my opinion of what's going to happen. That employee left 2 years and came back, and she's been working for me ever since. So, you know, that particular community health center does not exist anymore. You have to take those situations and truly think about it, look at your surroundings, and make your judgment based on what you see and what you feel. Because I could have told her all day long, don't do it. Don't do it. I mean, that's crazy. I wouldn't give up my time here. She'd been with our organization 15 years. And she dropped all that seniority to go and reach for the stars. When if she'd have just stayed right where she was, the stars would have came to her. So please keep that in mind. I see it time after time with new managers coming out of school. You know, I'll tell them what the starting salary is, and they're like, oh, well, I was thinking $80,000. And I'm like, well, you're thinking somewhere else. You can't come in and think you're going to work somewhere a year and you're going to make those big bucks. But I will tell you this. Make sure you can live. Make sure you can still eat. Maybe not ramen noodles anymore, but now you can go to McDonald's. But that you live a comfortable life, because that comfortable life will bring you happiness long term.
I tell them, but we only have 3 or 4 employees, so I mean, you know, it's just a different type of scenario. If we had made a decision to relieve someone of their responsibilities at our law firm and they were going to go make a major investment, we would pull them aside and say, you know, we're moving in a different direction.
Yeah, I think that's a little bit different.
Right, that's what I'm saying. Yeah, it's a different, 2 different worlds.
I don't think you have a dilemma there.
Yeah, no.
Ours is sales based, so if they're getting laid off, it's their fault.
It's not, yeah, and I guess it was more directed.
Right, yeah, right.
That has happened to me in a big organization. If you see bad news coming and you owe one debt to the organization because as the HR director, you represent the organization. But as a human being, you've got an employee that you see is about to make a decision based on something that's not going to be there on that.
Right.
Any other questions from the audience?
Let me thank you, all of you, for coming on that precious time that you have. And I know Mr. Beth, from my students in Georgia. I have 3 questions. Not each of you. 2.5, short, yes or no. Let's see, in your case, Mr. Bernie Madoff, are we going to have that type of dynasty called individual in the near future in the market? The question that was the email, are you releasing all of those information to the insurance company if they ask you? And George, we heard that within the last 4 or 5 years, some of the wrongdoing, some of those lawyers in the city of America, that they disbarred them. I'm sure you are aware of those. How about that code of ethics that you shared with us? And how about the policing? Did anyone talk about the cases and then they remove them from the basis that they were
Well, thank you, Dr. Foddy. I think the question was, are we going to have another Bernie Madoff? And the answer is absolutely we will. That's just human nature. You know, and that's why I think this topic is so important, because when it comes to your ethics, it is your behavior, it is your actions, it's based on your moral compass. And if you don't have that moral compass, then you can rationalize anything. Your behavior is whatever you want it to be. You know, one could argue, where does your morality come from? I mean, is that something that is inherent to you? Is it God-given? You know, what is it based upon? But if you don't have that sense of morality, then, like I said, you can walk your way around anything and rationalize it. And that's what some people do. And like William said, it can be for whatever reason. If they're unhappy with their work and they let it slip a little bit here and then a little bit there, you take Alan Stanford. I mean, he's right there about the same time as Bernie Madoff. And no, maybe it wasn't 15 billion, maybe it was $1.5 billion or $2 billion. But who knows where that got started? But there will always be individuals that are doing that. And it's just like the argument of a gun-free zone. You know, does that stop somebody from walking in there with a gun and shooting somebody? No, it doesn't. You know, if that person has it in their mind that they're going to do that, there's very little that you can do to stop it. So unfortunately, yes, that will happen. Fortunately, is the vast minority of people, certainly in my industry, and I would hope that that would be the vast minority in every industry.
So as it relates to HIPAA, our policy defines and outlines our steps that we will take, and so we made sure, based on the person over our HIPAA policies, that we took those steps to make us compliant with the regulations as it relates to HIPAA. I will tell you this, that the HIPAA policies we have, we were just discussing this yesterday, because as we have grown, I got there in 2001 as HR, and we had 115 employees and 20 providers. And so over 16 years of my time being there, we've grown drastically. And this was one of the situations, or one of the conversations we had, was that HIPAA is actually becoming more and more of an issue than it has been for us in the past, just because we were smaller and we could put more control and contain it. Some of our healthcare partners that are around us are a lot more strict than we are. And so we are actually going to go to a zero tolerance. And because we've had situations, I mean, even when I was HR, I think I was HR for 10 years, we had one issue, and it was a situation where an employee's daughter went to the school that we served in that community. And one of the students from that school came in and had a pregnancy test positive. So, of course, the mom, she's friends with this mom's daughter, and so the mom freaked out. You know, they're friends. If this is happening to her, what's happening to my daughter? So she went home and said, one of the students from your school come in today, they had a positive pregnancy test, we need to sit down and have a talk. And that student went back and knew exactly, because friends talk, knew exactly who had come that day. And the parent of the daughter that was pregnant, the positive pregnancy test, was furious. In some of my healthcare partners, if that same situation had happened, that person would have been terminated immediately. We did some education, some probation, you know, an opportunity to educate and try to, you know, and the employee is still with us, and I think they learned a valuable lesson. But at the same time, we're getting so big now that the risks are getting greater, and we're going to go to a more strict policy. But yes, we do have it defined and outlined about who the contacts are.
And addressing your questions on these two individuals, from the lawyer standpoint, in both instances, for both these individuals that I think you're referring to, it was self-policing within the bar, but the primary complaint came from the client. In one instance, it was involving a personal injury case, and so the client and then another individual that got brought in, both probably complained, but ultimately it was the client that went to the state bar and In that instance, the lawyer fairly quickly entered into a recovery program for some mental problems that he was apparently suffering from, and surrendered and was ultimately disbarred, but that's how that happened. That one probably was not as policed by the bar of lawyers as perhaps the other instance that you may be referring to. That involved questions both in a legal practice and perhaps commingling into a judiciary responsibility. One of the things that the Code of Conduct for judges says it's different than that for regular lawyers, and y'all probably heard this said, and I may have even said it today, but this is canon number 2. It says, every judge should strive to maintain the dignity of appropriate to the judicial office. The judge is the arbiter of facts and law for the resolution of disputes in a highly visible symbol of government. Under the rule of law, judges should avoid both impropriety and the appearance of impropriety in their professional and personal lives. So, certainly no judge is perfect. I know a lot of y'all in here, and I never said I was either, but in this instance, it was a situation that occurred both in a private practice commingled into an appearance of impropriety and an impropriety from the judicial perspective. So I think that the ramifications in that case may have taken longer for the action of the state bar to disbar this individual, because I think they wanted to make certain that in the removal of someone from both the position of a lawyer and that from the judiciary, that it was in fact appropriately investigated and handled. This person did also go into a recovery program, but at the end of the day, it is the policing of the bar, and we have an active state bar investigative panel. The judicial canon and code is very active. There's been, but in everything, that we've had problems within our own judiciary, investigators who have committed improprieties. You know, when you run in that level of that much power, it's often abused, and that's why this, both from the lawyer standpoint and from the judiciary, they do have a certain number of good checks and balances. So somebody is accountable to someone, and that tries to alleviate or at least minimize the amount of power that one person might have, because that power, it's a great recipe for an ethical disaster.
If you will, please join me in thanking our, sorry, Shelley, thanking our speaker today. And the last time I get a teachable moment with you guys, so I'm going to take advantage of it real quickly. One thing, if you listened carefully, that you heard from all 3 of our panelists today, all 3 of them deal in services. And when you get a job, the market today looks like most of you are going to be dealing in services, whether it's a personal service such as a pest control company where you're providing a service to clients, or you're working in a bank where you're providing that type of service, or anything else. What you're selling is your reputation. And if Lewis's reputation is not sterling, I'm not going to go to him for financial advice. And I'm certainly not going to give him my money. If Albany Primary Health Care has a reputation, even if I'm an underserved population and I need services, the word's going to get out, they don't treat you right there, or they're misusing Medicaid funds, so don't go there, or they're going to give your information, they're going to sell your information to people, then I'm not going to use their services. And certainly as an attorney, if I can't trust that he is going to represent my interests over the interest of his pocketbook, then I'm not going to give him my business. So the one thing I want you to take away from this in terms of ethics is what you are selling as a business person is your reputation. And that reputation, once you lose it, you heard about a guy moving across state. You know, depending on where you work, if you work in Sumter County, everybody's going to know who you are. You leave a job here and go to another job, even if it's not in Sumter County, if it's in Dougherty County, somebody in Dougherty County is going to call me and say, do you know so-and-so? You want that answer to be, yes, and let me tell you how good this person is. Not, yeah, you want to stay away from this person. As an HR person, I would never say that. I would simply say, you might want to check their references. But I'm telling you again, save your name. Your parents have told you this, you've heard it your whole life. Your name is your most important asset. That is true in business just like it is in other aspects of life. Thank you, congratulations, and we will see you guys on Friday at graduation, I hope. So congratulations to you, and thank all of y'all for being here today.